little game of what if as we welcome to the show Sportsline betting analyst Mackenzie Brooks. We also have our college football guru and the host of the Cover 3 podcast, Chip Patterson, ready to go. Guys, let's start with USC Michigan. It's so funny, Mackenzie, we ran that whole Sportsline model a couple of weeks ago about USC getting into the playoffs, and now here they are, 2-3, I believe, on the season. Realistically here, if they do find a way to upset Penn State, what if they do that? How does that affect their playoff chances?
It makes them better, but they're still really, really bad. If you want to talk an optimistic outlook, the odds makers are the most optimistic on this team. They had them at plus 172 to make the playoffs after they lost to Michigan. So if anyone's rooting for them, it is odds makers. But even them, they still give them around a 20% chance to make the playoffs if they win this game, which is certainly not high compared to other Big Ten teams here. So that's where we're looking for them. As for Penn State, losing this game is more where we're seeing an impact. If it's a close loss, they probably only move to around an 11 seed and just slightly dink their chances to make the playoff. But if they lose in a very poor fashion to a team that just lost to Minnesota, they could be out of this whole playoff conversation. We don't need a team in the playoff that lost to a team that lost to Minnesota here. You know, they haven't exactly been putting up style points necessarily with these wins. So this is a very important game for Penn State to show their cards here.
Penn State 5-0, USC is 3-2. I think I said that backwards, 2-3, but they are 3-2. So Chip, I'll come to you here after listening to Mackenzie break it down from the betting side. What has been going wrong for USC this year that has kept them in these conversations of do they belong in the CFB or do they not? What's been missing this year?
It starts where a lot of football does, at the offensive line. I mean, they were getting bullied at the line of scrimmage by Minnesota. And that's one of the reasons why they've got to improve that right away, because we know Penn State, whether it's Abdul Carter, Danny Dennis-Sutton, they're going to make life really difficult on Miller Moss. And that's the other part of this. So the offensive line has really struggled. The run game really isn't there. Miller Moss is having to throw the ball way too much. He's having to take on way too much pressure. I actually do think that this USC defense has continued to show the kinds of year-over-year improvement that we've been talking about. But for the Trojans, my focus really here is on Lincoln Riley. Because Lincoln Riley is the coach that you went to go get from Oklahoma, a guy who was reeling off conference championships. And if in the Big Ten era, he starts off 1-3, that is not what you pay the millions of dollars for. No, that are not results that you expect of someone like Lincoln Riley, because Haley, Mackenzie, those were Clay Helton results. And when Lincoln Riley is getting interim coach results, well, that's not working for USC. I mean, forget the playoff. They just need to win this to keep the vibe strong.
Yeah, speaking of vibes, I love this picture of Miller Moss. Anytime we get him on a full screen, it just gives me all the energy as you take a look at the numbers going back to the 2022 season. Mackenzie, I want to come back to you on this, because when we talk about Penn State, and I kind of tease to it, it's always like they're the team who is really, really good until they see an Ohio State, a Michigan, et cetera, et cetera. They've got Ohio State in 2 weeks as we look at the schedule here. How catastrophic would a loss be for them this week when you think about that game that we have highlighted right now on the screen?
It feels pretty catastrophic because you look at Ohio State and you look at the rest of that schedule. That is really the only school left to prove a really big, strong marquee matchup win over. So if they lose this USC game, it almost becomes like they have to win this Ohio State game to make sure that they make it into that conference championship game, because at that point there's a chance only 2 Big Ten teams are really making this playoff, and that is the 2 teams that are in the conference championship. So if you're not guaranteeing your ticket into the Big Ten conference championship, that means you're not guaranteeing your ticket into the playoffs. So losing this game to USC and then possibly losing that game to Ohio State, likely losing that game to Ohio State, you are now really not guaranteeing your ticket into that Big Ten conference championship.
So many people have this weekend circled on their list for games like that. Let's move on and talk about another game happening on Saturday. The whole new Saturday tour with Josh Pate is going to make its next stop in Eugene this weekend as Oregon gets set to host Ohio State, who we just talked about. Obviously, this is exciting. Ohio State kind of in the same boat as Penn State, where this is their first real test this season and playing an Oregon squad here. So, Mackenzie, when you look at this matchup for Oregon, what happens if they pick up a win this weekend?
They almost inherit Ohio State's odds to make the playoff. They become, you know, a pretty heavy lock, minus 850, and vice versa. Ohio State falls to Oregon. So they really just inherit each other's, you know, system here. As far as seeding, we'd probably have Oregon moving from that 8 seed up to a 2 seed, because that makes it very, very likely that they make the conference championship, which gets you, you know, around a 50% closer chance to getting one of those top 4 seeds. So that's why we like them to head to the 2. Obviously helps their playoff or their national championship percent goes from 9% to 15%. But when you talk about Heisman too, we talk about this dark horse here. The way Oregon would beat Ohio State is if Dylan Gabriel's putting up 3 passing touchdowns and 300 some yards and making this big case for himself. So now you start to have a jumble of Jalen Milroe, Cam Ward, maybe Dylan Gabriel, a 3-man quarterback race, which honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe starts ending up helping the Ashton Genties and the Travis Hunters if we got 3 quarterbacks that start canceling each other out here.
Chip, when you look at this matchup, Oregon versus Ohio State, 2 of the teams who we've been talking about since the merger with this new Big Ten that we knew would be in contention for the Big Ten championship later this year. What excites you about this matchup this weekend between these 2 teams?
Well, how much time you got, Haley? I mean, I could just get going right now. Like this series, so first ever top 3 matchup in Autzen Stadium. This is already being hyped as one of the most anticipated games in Oregon football history. Oregon football is a 21st century modern power because they didn't even have a 10-win season before 2000. And to see the Ducks have a chance for an arrival moment is absolutely huge. I mean, consider that since we had the most recent shifts in conference realignment, we have not yet seen a program join a major conference and win it in year 1. And what a win would do in terms of, as Mackenzie detailed right there, setting the Ducks up to be able to make the Big Ten title game, to lock that up with just Illinois and Michigan as the only remaining ranked teams on the schedule. And what winning the Big Ten would mean in terms of being able to land in this new conference and take it right away. You know, Dan Lanning, 38 years old, he's got an NIL war chest with a big old Nike check on it, but he also believes in the process and the fundamentals. But here's the thing, and this has really been bugging me in my head all week long. Now, this is an Oregon team that was the other side of Cam Newton. This is an Oregon team that was the other side of Ohio State, Cardale Jones, and that Buckeyes national title run. When is it time for Oregon to be the main character in college football, to be the true protagonist, the hero? It could be taking out the juggernaut Buckeyes on Saturday night.
Ooh, we will just have to wait and see. Like I said, Josh Pate will be there. That one kicks off at 7:30 Eastern. Let's talk about my favorite college football game of the year, the 120th edition of the Red River Rivalry, happening at the State Fair of Texas. I wish I could take all of you on a field trip to the State Fair so we could go to this game and also eat all of the amazing food. But Mackenzie, in all reality, not only is this a rivalry game for both of these teams, but this has pretty big, CFP implications too, especially for an Oklahoma team. Kind of on the outside looking in here, our what if question: what if Oklahoma upsets them? They improve to 6-1 against Texas, dating back to 2018.
Well, it makes them looking on the outside looking in a little bit less, but it's still really on the outside looking in. They probably moved to around plus 400 to make the CFP, which is still not great odds. But you look at it from the Texas perspective, right now it's about the seeding, okay? Where does this drop them if they were to lose this game? Now, it depends the fashion you're looking at here. If they lose in a Georgia versus Alabama style game, then it's probably you're only moving to the 6th seed and only decreasing your national championship percentage slightly. But if you lose terribly and you have Ewers who gets hurt again and Manning looks bad and it's just this catastrophic nightmare, that's when you start to see them possibly go to a 10 seed and hurting your CFP national title chances even more. So it's really the style that it is that they would lose, but that plus 450 would certainly fall a little bit more if they lose to an Oklahoma team.
Well, I think a loss would start everybody's favorite conversation, because if Quinn Ewers comes back and if Texas loses, now we got to look at Arch Manning. I mean, you would have to make a very difficult decision. Again, if they lose as a 14.5-point favorite in this game against an Oklahoma team that does not appear to have a functional offense or any healthy wide receivers. If Texas loses that game and you've got Georgia on deck coming to town, that you absolutely have to consider all options. I mean, this is a Longhorns team that painted a masterpiece for 30 minutes up up in the big house in Ann Arbor about Michigan. But everything we've learned about Michigan since then, we should look at that win differently and now understand that Texas needs to be able to hit its top gear. And Texas has not needed its top gear for almost a month. Now, Arch Manning has held things down and played really well as Quinn Ewers has been out. But if Quinn comes back and Texas loses, and again, we are playing the what if game, and this is what if Texas loses, then I think you have to look at going back to Arch Manning.
And Quinn Ewers is going to get the start. Coach Steve Sarkisian did announce that earlier today, so we will see him behind center. That one kicks off at 3:30 as well. So I'm excited to see that one get underway. Let's talk about Ole Miss, because they've kind of just been on a weird trajectory over the last couple of years with Lane Kiffin and the Lane Kiffin experience. But we had Gary Danielson on HQ earlier today, and he was asked about this big game coming up against LSU, top 15 showdown. And Gary Danielson said that the loser of this game between Ole Miss and LSU will be out of the college football playoffs. So when you look at what Ole Miss has done, they had that loss to Kentucky a couple of weeks ago. They were able to bounce back last week, but you know, what if, Mackenzie?
What if? If they do lose this game, I do agree that they are out of the playoff. We give them just under a 10% chance to make the playoff at that point, and that's because we have a likely loss against Georgia later in the schedule, and now you're a 3-loss SEC team. And being a 3-loss SEC team is probably the last thing you want to be, because there will be so many 3-loss SEC teams, and it's about deciding the caliber of those losses. How good is the bottom of the SEC that's starting to upset these teams? And that's when you're pinning yourself against the Texas A&Ms. You're pitting yourself against the Bamas, who honestly could be a 3-loss SEC team as well. So if you just get out of this with 2 losses, I think you're pretty guaranteed to make the playoff. But again, losing this game and also implying you're losing the Georgia game likely does put you at that 3-loss chaos spot, where I'm very curious to see who ends up being in that playoff.
Yeah, the crazy thing, I mean, like the really crazy thing that a lot of people don't talk about, and I wish more people did, is that with a 12-team playoff, you've got to put 12 teams in the playoff. I know, it's crazy. You got to find 12 teams to put in the playoff. I'm not writing anybody out of the college football playoff conversation right now, because we have no idea what it's going to look like across the landscape. I mean, what if the Big 12 is a 1-bid league? And what if the ACC is a 1-bid league? And what if Notre Dame loses to both Army and Navy, which is not that crazy? Being the 4th or 5th team available for the College Football Playoff Selection Committee in a conference like the Southeastern Conference still might be able to get you in. I mean, we do this in the basketball tournament all the time. You say, oh, that doesn't look like a tournament team. Oh, that doesn't look like a playoff team. But the crazy thing is, you still got to find 12 teams to put them in there. And as we're here in year 1 of the 12-team playoff, I think we'll find ourselves echoing like a Clemson coach, Dabo Swinney, who said, guys, most years there's not even 4 worthy teams for our 4-team playoff. You're going to have some teams that right now you're like, oh, they can't roar their way back. But college football always delivers chaos in the final weeks of the season. I ain't writing anybody off at this point.
And it's interesting you say that, because I'm just bringing it back to the betting standpoint, as I typically do here. You know, it's everybody's first time with the 12-team playoff, right? Odds makers as well. They don't necessarily know the exact formula as to how to set lines for this situation, and we're always trying to reverse engineer. What are the odds makers saying? What are they implying? They're implying that any 3-loss SEC team should be in there. The way that these teams that are projected to end with 3 losses are priced to make the playoff makes you think that the odds makers really think any of them could make it. Now, I disagree with that. I think there's going to be different levels of 3-loss SEC teams depending on the caliber of those losses. But then it's like, how do you know what the caliber of these losses are when all of these great bottom SEC teams end up playing well? So it's very interesting to see how in the first year, it's our first time, it's odds makers' first time, and I think somebody's going to have to be wrong in this whole 3-loss SEC conversation.
Yeah, it's just going to be interesting because, like you said, and like Chip said, this is going to be the first time that we have seen this sort of play out. So it'll be cool to see how it looks. Chip, before we let you go, I got a follow-up question for you, just going back to Ole Miss here. When you look at the rest of their schedule, at LSU, OU, Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi State, if they do find a way to pull out the win against LSU this week, looking at the rest of the schedule, what does that look like for Ole Miss? Do you think at that point maybe they're feeling good, they can win out, or how do you see the rest of this year playing out?
Well, all right. So, I mean, the game at LSU is a 3-point spread, kind of a coin flippy type game. If they are going to win that game, then it makes the Georgia game huge for tiebreaker scenarios because we've got this 16-team conference. Not everybody is playing everybody, and they've already got the loss to Kentucky. So if they find themselves at the end of the season as a one-conference loss team, then they need to have that head-to-head against Georgia because the way that these tiebreakers are settled are head-to-head results and records against other teams that are also tied. So if we have a 3-way, a 4-way tie for one of those 2 spots in Atlanta, having those wins against the other teams that are also in that tiebreaker scenario, that's going to be what pushes you over the top. So, like, on one hand, Ole Miss is going to be able to finish with a strong SEC record because they don't play many of the best SEC teams. On the other hand, that hurts Ole Miss if they don't get the wins against the good SEC teams they play. So if they beat LSU, Georgia at home becomes a must win if they want to make it to Atlanta, which, by the way, has never happened for Ole Miss football in its program history, making the SEC title game.
Don't tell that to Lane Kiffin. He loves proving everybody wrong out down there in Mississippi. Chip Patterson and Mackenzie Brooks helping us play the what if game when it comes to college football. I can't believe we're already in week 7 of the college football season, but here we are. Just like the teams get prepped for the big game every weekend, make sure you're prepped for the college football slate by locking into the Cover 3 podcast. Chip Patterson, the host of that show. Mackenzie makes occasional drop-ins on the Cover 3 as well with some picks. It's must listen, much watch podcast television. So scan that QR code on your screen or listen in wherever you get your audio.